everyone. This is Bek Abdullayev dialing in from Super Dispatch. We have a special guest today on Auto Transport Copilot. Auto Transport Copilot is a podcast specifically designed for the auto transport industry. Our goal is to bring in carriers, brokers, shippers into the show and everybody else in the automotive ecosystem that interacts with auto transport so that we can talk about what's happening in the industry, the challenges we face as an industry, and how we overcome these problems as an industry and as a community. Something new that we are trying now is I get asked a lot of questions about Super Dispatch, how we do things at Super Dispatch, what plans we have, how the magic comes together. And there are over 100 people that work on Super Dispatch every day. And we're beginning to open the curtain a little bit and give you a sneak peek into the behind the scenes of what's happening at Super, what we're working on, and how we're tackling some of the challenges that we face as an industry. So today I have a special guest, Jake MacDonald. A lot of you know Jake. Hopefully you don't have to talk to Jake because Jake is leading our fraud monitoring and fraud investigations unit inside Super Dispatch. So if there's ever a problem with fraud or theft or double brokering, there are measurements that Super Dispatch is putting in place between our compliance team, our trust unit inside the product organization, and Jake's team tackling fraud. Jake, welcome to Auto Transport Copilot.
Hey, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, great to have you. So Jake, you and I have worked for a long time.
Yes.
In fact, I remember when you were hired, you went through an unusual interview process. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up at Super Dispatch.
Yeah, so a mutual friend that was working with Super Dispatch at the time, he referred me over. I was working with XPO Logistics as a support agent, and that was pretty much my introduction into logistics, is from the freight side. And a friend was saying, hey, you should jump over here. We could use you on the support side. So we did. And yeah, after the interview process, jumped on board and got introduced to the world of car hauling. And it is very similar and very different in many ways. And adjusted to that, put some time into Super Dispatch, was in support for about, it would be 5 years pretty much, and put in the time. And as soon as the support team started to expand, I felt that I needed to expand as well. And I moved on to fraud investigation. I just saw a lot of it come up in support, and there needed to be some answers and some protocols in place. So I took it upon myself to jump into that. And I have been doing this for pretty much a year at this point. So yeah, that's pretty much my Super Dispatch run in a nutshell.
How many years have you been at Super Dispatch in total?
It will be 6 years in February.
Well, I've really enjoyed working with you. Just going back to support days for a moment, what was it like supporting customers of Super Dispatch in the industry? What was it like running support at Super Dispatch?
It was very hectic. There's problems of all kinds from every angle. And it was just a matter of like tackling and understanding the problems. I always said with a support team, finding out what the problem is the hardest part. The answers are actually really easy because it's like, oh, they've ultimately, you get this long story and then it just boils down to, I forgot my password, which that's easy. It was like, yeah. Okay. But like the sentiments were still actually important. Like while you can break down the essence of what they're asking to just like, oh, all they need is the password reset. The problems are still real. It's like, okay, somehow they did not figure this out on their own. And that is useful product feedback. And we started basically developing a system to help feature requests here, bug reports there, flushing that out, making sure the customers are really heard, and comes up enough. It's like, okay, something's got to happen. So we were finding a way to collect customer feedback to just improve. And as a result, it did pay off. We started receiving less questions for the same thing. It showed. It paid dividends. So just listen, and that's powerful enough.
Thanks for sharing that. So you hear talk about fraud, and we talk about this topic a lot, and good job recently on the webinar focused on fraud that we ran. I was at a conference recently, a couple of weeks ago. I was at Used Car Week, and during my time there, I spoke to lots of people, and nearly every single conversation that I had from someone that somehow is inside auto transport industry or is adjacent to auto transport, fraud was top of mind. From the fraudulent activities to the role of FMCSA or in their efforts or lack thereof of their efforts to try to combat fraud. But fraud is definitely top of mind. It's emerged significantly in the last year, and it doesn't seem like it's going away. So what do you attribute this phenomenon to? What do you think is behind the growing number of fraudulent activities in auto transport?
I would say it's a byproduct of starting to introduce technology to things. Like the industry is definitely starting to tech up, so to speak, start to like keep track of things. It's better than pen and paper. You can retrieve the data easier, keeps things transparent, all the works. The problem is that as a side effect. And if you don't keep your security in check whilst also maintaining your data, people want that. Instead of having to physically go into your building, go through the filing cabinet, they can just look for your email and password. And the methods of getting that are like infinite. Like there's many ways to get to that. And I think why fraud is jumping so much is because the industry is slowly moving over to a more technologically advanced position, but it's so slow that fraud is actually since innovating the industry where it's actually like setting the path of where it needs to go. Where everyone catches up, fraud moves a few steps ahead. And we got to catch up. And then fraud moves a few steps ahead again. So it does innovate and it actually like incentivizes people to like catch up with it. The problem is like a lot of people don't know how to catch up to it. And I think that's where you see a lot of the problems starting to grow is people are starting to be left behind in the technological scape. And so like, it's really on you to just be like, okay, I need to know everything. Like it's not about trucking anymore. Now it's about computers and apps and GPS tracking and all this stuff. So there's a lot being thrown at you and you have to learn it so fast because if you don't, someone else knows it faster and will either take your business or like take your business as in like identity theft and things like that. Like there's a lot of methods for that, but yeah, that's kind of where I see the industry going. And you're right, it is not going anywhere. It's actually getting worse. There's been way more cases of double brokering being reported, cases of identity theft, FMCSA pins being compromised. Yeah, like you mentioned the FMCSA and what it does, like it has its purposes, but its purposes they don't bring as much value as they did when they were initially made. Like that was the bottom line. And if fraud is as bad as it is now, and that's where the bottom line is, it like there's no choice but to raise the bar. You have to. Because too much is getting by. They've learned like bad actors learned how to get past that bottom line and very easily, I might add. It's not difficult at all. When you raise that bar, they'll see that and they'll go above that. You'll have to raise the bar again. And thus the innovation continues.
What exactly is the problem with FMCSA and their role in all of this?
So the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this is the identification of the user on the other side. So I can look at a company. I can look at Bek's Trucking LLC. I can see you're authorized. I can see you've got cargo insurance. I can see you've got all these things that say you're a legally functioning entity. Am I talking to you? That's a big problem. Is nothing tells you the ethics behind the company. There's ratings and things like that, but good guys turn bad too. Like documents can show you that they're good guys and you can still have a bad experience. People really want to like know who this is on the other side. They want the transparency. The problem is the technology that's present doesn't really help with that. It helps in some ways and makes it worse in others. Because it's like, yeah, I see the documents, but I don't physically see you there. And because of that, anyone is anybody. And with FMCSA pins being compromised and loopholes being used to change data, can't even use that information anymore. Like nothing's sacred, right? Like nothing can actually be used as definitive truth to say like, this is the phone number for the company. This is the owner and what they look like. There's nothing like that. And it's impossible to verify that. And that's where I think a lot of the trouble is like the bar has to be raised. It's becoming more and more difficult for newer guys to come on. But the other side of that coin, it's becoming easier and easier for fraudulent bad companies to get on to the point where like they have multiple companies in their back pocket to use. Like they have a Rolodex.
By get on, you mean become here as a legitimate company in the eyes of the public. Yeah. So the FMCSA is a federal agency, correct?
Yes.
And their role is to vet and authorize legitimate companies and actors to provide certifications, right, and authorization to operate as a broker or a carrier.
Yeah.
Okay. So what exactly is broken inside of that system?
It's the identity behind the company. Like, yes, it's a taxable entity. it exists. I see it exists, but like, so what? So if a bad company can still exist, that doesn't tell me anything about like what they're going to do. Can I trust this guy? How long have they been in business and coverage and things like that? It's all scattered everywhere.
Yeah, but
FMCSA
I
has
guess what I'm getting
purposes
at is FMCSA authorizing people that are fraudulent companies, people that say people are not who they say they are, for example. Are they able to obtain authorization and appear to be a legitimate company today?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the government agency that monitors and authorizes legitimate companies that are authorized to operate from those that don't isn't working.
Right.
So I can walk in and game the system and I can obtain paperwork that makes me look like a legitimate company. But you're also saying that I can also pretend to be somebody else. I could pretend to be Jake MacDonald with Jake Transport, but I'm actually Bek. And I can do that. I can game this monitoring agency to do that.
Yeah. Not only can you create a new one, you can pretend to be a pre-existing one that's been in business for years and like has.
So that
a
means
good
I can
reputation.
hijack. So I can hijack an existing reputable business.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of good guys turning bad.
What's the vulnerability of that? What exactly is broken inside the how FMCSA works that's allowing this?
FMCSA PIN comes up a lot in these cases where that's where they're getting buyer verification. Why I was saying nothing's sacred. As soon as that PIN is shared with somebody else, all that information is subject to change. So everything that was good can change to whatever the bad guy wants. And because of that, it's impossible to determine like, when do we know the bad guy's out, right? We help them, we fix it and stuff like that. But it's like, are we really talking to the good guy, or do we just help secure the bad guy's hold on said account? And the methods for getting the PIN have really varied. I've heard all kinds of reports, and it most of the time comes down to they don't know really how the information was given out. And I can interpret that many ways, but I do know phishing is easily one of them. They give away that
This is
information when they
phishing with
really
a
shouldn't.
PH, right? PH phishing.
Yes. Yeah.
Just to be clear, yeah.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
when you get scammed for your login information, right?
Yes. Like
Yeah.
they'll take you to like a fake broker will say like, okay, you're interested in this load, sign up on our website here and you can take that there. And really what you're doing is you're just submitting your email and password and other sensitive data so that it can feed to them and they can use you later. They're literally adding you to a Rolodex of companies that they can use for their own benefits. Websites, yeah, just simply calling you and having you share the data. I've heard accusations of data breaches. Very hard to confirm that stuff, but it comes up a little too often to where I am suspicious to say like, yeah, maybe there was one. But again, I have no confirmation of that. It just comes up way too often for it to be a coincidence.
Okay, so this is pretty scary stuff. We have a large problem, and I know this is happening in the freight world as well. It's not just exclusive to auto transport. But the big problem, so we have this problem of now, as you're describing, of bad actors appearing to be legitimate companies inside the industry, right? What do you see? What types of fraud are these companies engaging in? Now that they have obtained the face or the storefront of a legitimate business and they're pretending to be somebody who they're not, what are they doing with this tool and with this information?
Biggest one is double brokering. That comes up a lot. I don't know if like double brokering, like in a nutshell, I'll just describe is basically when a third party is unauthorized to move a vehicle. So I gave a load to you, Bek. You gave it to another carrier, and that carrier delivers the load. Say that carrier damages it or something went wrong. Who's liable there? Whose insurance is going to cover it? Surely not yours. Your insurance, like you never physically held the vehicle. Their insurance wasn't contracted to do it. It's a mess. And on top of that, if it was delivered, fine, I would pay you. The other carrier wouldn't get paid at all. He did something for free, makes victims of a lot of people. And
so I will appear to be legitimate. I will get a load from you. I will have somebody else do this load. A carrier will haul this load for me, right? Once it's delivered, I will collect from you, but I will not pay the carrier.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And are these companies doing this at a larger scale? Like, do they run this for an amount of time and then disappear? What happens?
Yeah, they do scale. You get got once, right? Like, shame on me. I got. So I cancel it from you and I give it to someone else. The chances of that someone else being you again is much higher. If you think about it from
Okay.
a fraudulent perspective, like if you kind of go in there, think of it from you were in fraud, what would you do? Well, you already know my verification process. You know what documents I'm asking for. You've talked to me before. You
Yeah.
might have messed up the answers the first time, but now you know the answers second time around. So you're going to have all the right things to say. And if you fail it a second time, you got a third try. Like you can keep coming back. So from a fraudulent perspective, it makes sense to actually keep going to the same guy. And it takes a while to shake them off.
So are you
So like,
saying that as a fraudulent operator, the same outfit or same group or same team or same individual can have multiple storefronts or multiple names that they're operating under?
yeah, I just call it their Rolodex. They just have a bunch of companies on file just to use. It's like, okay, when I was talking to Bek's Trucking, who was I? Was I John? Was I Joe? Was I Steve? You know, like and it's the same guy. Like you'll get the same call from the same voice saying like, I'm Joe or John, you know, like they have them on standby. Like if they're able to get that, if they're able to create accounts so easy, if they're able to get information from other reputable companies so easy, it kind of makes sense to just have a bunch on backup, because the instant your fraudulent account gets caught, you can jump to another one and hit the ground running and keep going. They do it full time.
So it sounds like from double brokering, and you seeing, is this an increasing activity? Is it steady? What are the trends with double brokering today?
It is increasing. There's a lot of, at least from my perspective, when I call these guys, they'll say like, I've never had to deal with this before, or like, this has never happened before. I'm hearing that a lot more. And these guys have been in business for a long time, and it's just like things change. In some cases, it's like, I'm glad it turned out this way, because now it's time to start thinking about red flags, preventive measures, start looking at that terms and conditions, consult your legal consultants, start thinking about things to prevent and also protect yourself when it happens.
So I'll just stay on double brokering for a second. This comes up a lot. I know it's a
Mhm.
big hot topic in my conversations as well. What have you seen from what we're doing as an industry, as technology providers? How are we fighting double brokering in the industry today?
So first, we had to learn what the bare minimum was, as I was talking about before, with just what the FMCSA provides. We provide that stuff up front. In order to even be on the load board, that stuff needs to be there, in addition to the things that we also ask for. When they put down a phone number, we are looking to see if that matches up with what we see in the FMCSA. And like I said before, like FMCSA can be prone to problems, but it's what we have. We look at that phone number, see if that's different. We'll call the number on the FMCSA, and that's where a lot of identity theft actually gets caught. The real owners, because maybe their FMCSA pin wasn't compromised, they didn't get changed in time, whatever it was. We actually get in contact with the real owners, and they're like, I'm not even a car hauler, or the company's shut down. It's been shut down for a long time, stuff like that. We catch quite a bit that way. We've also implemented like just other security issues like two-factor authentication and things like that. But we also have like methods of the stuff that I use is seeing when VINs appear again, is trying to see like, okay, so this Civic was dispatched to this guy, and yet this broker dispatched that same that Civic's VIN to another guy, and very short amount of time. So there's a connection there. So it prompts an investigation, as well as we've implemented ways for shippers to report when carriers do some like malicious activity, as well as the rating system. And that has been way more helpful than even I anticipated it was going to be. Like, it was like, okay, we can just look at negative ratings and see, okay, like obviously they're doing bad things. The positive ratings actually turned out to be quite helpful in a way I did not expect. So this is what I was talking about with the Rolodex. And this is good for people to know when you're vetting a carrier or a broker, is look at the positive ratings, specifically their oldest ones. If you notice that there is a bunch of positive ratings back to back to back to back to back, same day, obviously that's wrong. There's no way that you could get 20 good ratings in one day based on like however much they're moving. Yeah. And pay attention to the names of those companies. Because while you can probably know some by name, and you're like, okay, that's a reputable guy. But then you'll notice like some of the names will be like Jake's Concrete or Bek's Landscaping. Like they're actually not even car haulers. Like if you look them up, they're actually not car haulers at all. It's just that Rolodex. They were using a bunch of companies that they had on file to buff their ratings. And it's been actually very helpful, because it's actually unearthed like a spider web of a bunch of connected accounts that we're able to get in just like one fell swoop. The positive ratings have actually been extremely helpful in that aspect. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we've implemented to try and stay ahead of the guys, because they definitely came to us like every other load board and we're like, okay, dig in. We're going to start doing our typical fraudulent stuff that we all do. And we already seen it on the other places. So we see that, we address it, we fix it, and shut it down and like slow them down. And it's funny because like you can tell they are learning like the process too. They're checking every nook and cranny to see what they can get away with. Any inch can be taken a mile. It's actually taught us quite a bit about our own system too. So again, bad guys kind of innovate the way and show.
I noticed that when about a year and a half ago, when I started hearing a lot more stories about double brokering, fraudulent activity, some theft in the industry, almost felt like when you look exactly at how people get away with fraud, it feels like they know exactly how the industry functions. They just know so much. And it just feels like it's an inside job. The people that are causing all these issues, it's almost like know exactly how everything functions, how everything works, and how to deceive. Also, how to say the right things, how to show the right things, how to game FMCSA as well. These aren't the things you can Google and learn on your own unless you function and you operate inside the industry. I remember suspecting like this looks like an inside job. And as this continued to grow and grow and grow, I can't help but think of it as an organized crime network.
Yes.
Targeting general freight, transportation, logistics markets.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I've definitely seen that. I've actually been seeing a lot of like news reports from like FBI stating they found a bunch of vehicles in shipping containers with their VIN scratched off that were heading off overseas. I worked with Laredo Police Department in Texas to catch it, guys. We actually got some in stings, which I recommend. If you've ever, I'm setting up a sting operation to catch a bad guy. It was probably the most fun thing ever when we actually caught a bad guy. I recommend it. It's absolutely great because a lot of them get away with it, which sucks because like.
So wait, you were part of a sting where they caught the bad guys?
Yeah, we used our GPS location stuff to track where they were going, estimate it, and they left the vehicle there. They returned and they got them.
So were you cooperating with the authorities to try to make the bust?
Yeah, reach out to them and was saying like, do you know about this? And got me to the right detective. He was able to do it that night. I think he said he was up there till like 4 a.m. He was like really tired when I called him, but they got him. And unfortunately, rare when that kind of stuff happens. It's great when it does. But like to what you were saying before, is it organized? Yes. And there's a lot of organized crime behind it. And it's actually like when you start hearing stories about they have to deliver, Lamborghini goes to Death Valley, like in the middle of the desert. And I'm not kidding. This is what I've heard. Like, will a guy in a mask and a hoodie and sunglasses will show up and pay you, and you leave. He drives that vehicle to another location, takes the tracker out, and then it's never seen again. The paying is the part where I think it's organized, because a lot of the petty stuff is just like they're trying to salvage as much money as they can, right? Like they're just trying to get as much as they can so they can abandon. The paying at location tells me stay quiet so we can keep doing this, right? Like it's almost implied that it's scaled. And that's why I do think it's organized, and it absolutely is, because it's like they don't want that carrier to be involved anymore. Like they're paying you and saying your part of this contract is over. You don't need to be involved anymore. And it's the extra step that kind of scares me. It's like if they're paid at location like that, that's like off with you kind of thing.
Do you see any other kinds of activities outside of double brokering and theft happening in the industry?
Yeah, aside from identity theft and, all that stuff, like there's the security breaches, things like that. Other like breach of contract stuff. It's not as like intense as like say a stolen vehicle, but like broker fees are not paid up. So like if you agreed to this in the contract, if you signed it, that's part of the deal. Things like that. Payment disputes, of course. Payment disputes are also like the other biggest one. A lot of that stuff is miscommunication. It's just either people that are too angry to think that they just want to get paid and get paid now, or they just don't want to pay them because they were mean or something like that. There's a lot of like communication that needs to be done between them, and just kind of like an introduction of a third party can help quite a bit, where it's just, you're not taking a side. You're just like, okay, let's fulfill the contract. You guys don't have to work together again. Just do what you said that you're going to do. Like if there's damage, file a claim, just get everything back on track so things can move forward and go separate ways.
So I know that people that are on the Super Dispatch platform, they have the ability to report anything they see, anything that's suspicious, right? Any kind of activity. What happens with that? Walk us through what happens or what's been happening since we started allowing companies on the platform to report anything suspicious or if they think is fraudulent. What's happening with that?
It prompts an investigation to me. Like those go straight to me. And I look at what is said and I'll look at all the details of it and I will investigate what you've given me. I will follow up to see if there's more information or perhaps there's some documents that I need that further provides evidence that the claim is true. And I'll pretty much just start the investigation from there. I'll start looking through. I'll look at whatever I need to, inspections, bills of lading, all that stuff. The reports prompt investigations, and those have been really helpful in terms of like proactive measures. The thing that's very nice is with Super Dispatch, we have a lot of customers that keep the trust alive. Like they actually want good guys on here. Obviously, you do, but they want to see Super Dispatch succeed because they've seen where it fails. And they see that Super Dispatch is doing something about it, feels heard. And like bad guys don't like it when good guys work together. A lot of the times they like it when good guys fight one another so they can, exit stage left, right? So it's actually reassuring because not only am I able to catch the bad guy, but also the customers are getting more savvy to what red flags are. And the problem with understanding red flags is you need to just be in the industry. You need to have the wisdom. You need to be seasoned. You need to know what is the correct thing to do to be able to even understand what's wrong. And they're picking it up. Like they're picking it up actually pretty quick. And they're recognizing the same things and they let me know. And we act on those and we make it happen. They're just as important.
So when you talk to carriers, brokers, or shippers, what advice are you giving to legitimate companies to safeguard their information and to try to prevent being a victim of fraudulent activity?
So the first one, this is one that I always say is like, well, one, know the red flags, which I can go into those. But the one thing that I always say is look at your terms and conditions because the preventive measures are good. Obviously, those help, but you can't pretend like it won't ever happen to you because when it does happen to you, you'll be taken off guard and you won't know what to do. So the thing that I always suggest is work with a legal consultant to review your terms and conditions or write them out and really brainstorm your protocols when some fraudulent activity happens. What happens when the vehicle has been missing? How long do you wait until like you report something? If you detect double brokering, what's the protocol? Have these things lined out and also have your terms and conditions protect you when the contract is broken. Because always think about it like if there's an investigation with it, if there's an open case and it ends up going to court, you want to have all the things, all your evidence gathered in a pile so that like when you can provide it, like everyone sees very clearly what the process was. In addition to that, it helps with, in a funny way, it's also like a stress reliever. I've seen a lot of people where the vehicle goes missing and they're pulling their hair out. It's like a over $100,000 car and they're just like, oh my God, it's gone. You don't know what to do. And it's like, you want to have those protocols in place because as you're fulfilling those, you'll start thinking more logically and you'll be like, okay, we need to start looking at this. We need to start addressing these issues. It settles you down because when you start getting stressed and stuff like that, things don't work efficiently, things slow down, and time is tantamount when you're dealing with fraud because the more time given to them is only the bad guy's friend. So I always say, look at terms and conditions to see what to do when something happens and review your protocols with your team. The red flags, obviously, I've gone through a lot of those, like the rating system, and like there's a lot of preventive measures.
So before you get into that, I just want to point out, I mean, that sounds good, but if I'm a small business and I'm not a lawyer, I just want to be honest. I'm not reading terms and conditions. I'm signing them, like I download an app or whatever. I'm not going to read the 20-page contract. I don't know what it says. I'm just going to agree to it and start using the app or whatever, right? Yeah. So realistically, as a small business owner, without access to maybe legal counsel or whatever, I don't really have access to that. Like, I think that I'm more curious about the red flags or more practical things that I can do. Like, are there more practical things that I can do or watch out for to not fall victim other than like legally protecting myself, which is still good advice. But I'm thinking like if I'm a small business owner, that's not going to be my first go-to
Right.
to cross my, T's and dot my I's in my contracts.
Sure. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Basically, what you're doing is you're trying to gather, if you're just starting out like that, you're trying to gather as much experience as you can and soak up as much as you can get. It's very hard for a new company to start now. With the rise of fraud, people don't want to take a chance on it. It's like, well, you have to work for a year and have so much experience. Well, it's like, well, how can you get the experience when no one wants to give you a load? It's very hard to get that start. But knowing the red flags for like that kind of stuff, like I said, the ratings, like really look at these things, like look at it from a perspective of like, if you were a fraudulent company, how would you try and get away with something? Look at those positive ratings and negative ratings, see what you might be getting into, see if they've got a history, Google them. Google actually helps quite a bit because there's ratings all over the place. Understand that they might be skewed more towards the negative, but that is still telling as to what you're getting into with this. Like it's all risk assessment. It's all figuring out like, is it worth it? Does the vehicle need to move now? Do I not have any time to waste? Understand the risk you're getting into that. You're going to get the first bidder. And while it might be complex in some cases, arriving late is better than not at all. So like, it's just kind of like the state of where things are at. Other red flags, like I always say, call them and get your general intuition about the person you're talking to. If you're able to have their information up there and actually refer to that information as they talk and make sure that they confirm these things, kind of bring it up in the conversation. If you start to get things that don't match up, understand the risk there. But yeah, to kind of turn it back, newer companies will have to do a lot to prove trust.
Sounds like it. Would it be accurate to say that transacting on a load board is more likely to result in a fraudulent activity than directly between parties that have a pre-established relationship?
I would say with fraud growing, the chances are way bigger on a load board versus in person.
But I'm thinking like if I'm using Super, right? If I'm using Super, I have two options. If I'm a ship or a broker, I have my own carriers that I trust and I know that I've used before. I'm going to directly assign those jobs to them and keep track of them instead of going on the load board where I'm potentially working with new companies that I've never met before.
Yeah.
So like it sounds like there's going to be more work there. Like I have to vet. Yeah, they're vetted, but I have to look at the ratings and reviews and all that.
Yeah. Having that inner circle of trusted guys, that's what you want. That is the ultimate goal, is having trustworthy group that you can rely on. Trust is earned. They earn that through the work that they do with them. So like, it's expected that if it's the first time you're going to work with this, expect the process to go slow. I hear a lot of people say, I don't have the time for it. And it's like, well, time is money. And if you're going to put in the time to either negotiate for more money or, things like that, you can save some stuff too. Just know that when you're starting out, you got some hurdles to go through because of where things are, and understanding how fraud works. If you're a new guy and you understand how fraud works, you'll probably have a much easier time working through those brick walls when you're trying to get work, because you know why they have that in place. And in another way, you can look at it like, okay, if I'm a driver and I'm trying to book a load with a broker and they're asking all these questions and it's just berating me, that tells me that guy is good. If he is very meticulous about the information that he wants and he makes it clear what he wants, he's showing responsibility. He's showing the necessity to get the vehicle moved. That tells me it's probably legit. Maybe the guys that make it very difficult to work with, the ones that have all those documents, are actually the ones you might want to start looking at. Understand you might have to do some work on the side just to, stay busy, but kind of work at that. Like you can make way with
when I look at overall technology landscape, I'm seeing a lot more platforms and websites doing more identity verification. I feel like inevitably this is going to lead to some identity verification features or tools where you have to verify. Like even at the airport, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but they have this camera now. You give them your ID, scan your ID, and then it takes photo of you only to match against the ID to make sure it matches, right? It's not just the eye test of like the person, the gate agent or whatever, like they may not notice it's not you, right? But now they have tagged just like, is this really who they say they are? And I just feel like that's going to happen. If that's the problem, it's not sustainable for us to jump on a call every time and try to figure like, are you legit or not? Is this a
Yeah.
person I can trust? This is not scalable. If I'm moving thousands and thousands of cars, I'm not going to do that all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking there's going to have to be a role with, especially with emergence of AI, role around identifying suspicious activity, automatically flagging those suspicious activities. And it sounds like definitely around identity verification.
That's where I think FMCSA should spend a lot of their time trying to work on, is that part. It's a give or take. It's like you're giving up some security to fix a problem. How bad do you want the problem fixed? Well, if it cost you an over $100,000 vehicle to go missing, I'm sure it's just like, you know what? Yeah, we need to know who this person is.
Yeah. What concerns me with that is that it's a government agency that we currently have no ability to influence. And I know that the industry, a lot of the stakeholders in the industry are actively working to have conversations and a dialogue with FMCSA. And I believe the FMCSA is receptive. I believe they're listening, which I give them lots of credit for that. But as someone who likes to build innovative technologies in a short amount of time, I sort of want to build and implement things and quickly. And I'm afraid by the time FMCSA is able to take action,
It'll be too
we
late.
may see a lot more damage done.
Yeah,
So I wonder if the private sector, and I think maybe we see this today, the private sector will emerge with more options on how to vet these players better and how to fight fraud overall.
Maybe like the actual manufacturers themselves will start being involved. That's what I was thinking, was if they have their own drivers that they trust that are a part of their own payroll, that'll probably help. It really does come down to, like, it seems like meeting the person like
There's no
eye.
way. I don't think manufacturers are going to transport their own cars.
Really?
You know, the whole ecosystem exists yet to transport cars for them on trucks and rails and driving. I can't remember which OEM, but somebody, is it Nissan? One of the OEMs does have some drivers on payroll. So a portion of the transport they do themselves. You know, CarMax does this. CarMax has hundreds of trucks that they operate across the country where they transport their cars. But again, they can't handle the entire volume themselves. They're still dependent on a network of third-party vendors. And I think at the end of the day, figuring out how to build trust between two parties on an online transaction, it looks like my takeaway is really from talking to you over time and today and learning about this is that it's just a reality that we have to deal with. It's not going away. So we have to continue innovating and building and fighting it because technology is not going away. We're not going back to, phone calls and paper and handshakes. All the contracts we're signing today are on DocuSign digital. So digital is not going away. We know that. And with digital, it sounds like we are inheriting bigger risks around fraudulent activity. So it's going to come down to like who's fighting it better and who's protecting the customers in these transactions better, and technology platforms quickly adopting these tools to fight fraud.
Yeah, that makes sense. It depends on how bad the industry wants the problem to be solved. And considering how like trust is an issue in the first place, it is a tall order to expect everyone to come together and say, okay, look, here's how we solve the problem. It's probably going to be someone that comes along and says, like, I've got this new idea that everyone can benefit from. And that'll probably set the new standard. I think it's only a matter of time before fraud catches up to that, but whatever that may be. Yeah.
So it's a race. It's a constant race.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you nobody likes losing cars. I can guarantee you that. It's just that I think it hasn't been a big issue. Business owners are in the business of keeping their people employed, making money, servicing their customers. They're not in the business of actively fighting fraud. I think out of necessity, we are collectively forced to deal with these issues. And I think that hopefully that's the answer. Hopefully we continue working together as a community in this industry, because if we're fighting things in silos, we may not be as effective. These guys are coordinated. They're smart. They're leveraging technology. So I think the response perhaps should also be the same. And really the conversations that I've had with some of the stakeholders in the industry, and I'm continuing to have with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs and larger corporations, is how do we coordinate our efforts in a way to make fraud nearly impossible or extremely difficult to happen in the auto transport space?
Yeah, of course. And again, like, bad guys don't like it when good guys work together. And
that's it. You said that. That's
And
right. You said that.
it's just like the silos will have to pretty much grow,
Yeah.
and they'll have to let people in slowly. And as soon as a bad guy gets caught, they have to kick him out, and then let everybody else know. It's like, hey, don't let him into your silo. So yeah, it's probably going to be a bunch of big groups that band together to create their trusted groups. But yeah, bad guys like it when good guys fight. They do not like it when they work together. They don't like it when they ask questions. They just want to get that dispatch. And
Good. Well, let's keep working on getting all the good guys working together to fight a common enemy.
yeah,
And thanks for being on the show, Jake. Really enjoyed talking to you about fraud and sharing some of these things with our audience and with our customer base. If fraud is persistent, as we continue to build new things and release new things, we might have you back to talk more about fraud and some of the new tools we have in our toolkit to help customers fight fraud.
sounds good, man. Yeah, thanks for letting me share this. I want to, let all the good guys know about the bad guys and make them smarter and beat this thing.
Thanks, Jake.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to Auto Transport Copilot. Today, I was able to catch up with Jake MacDonald from Super Dispatch. Jake is a longtime employee and an industry veteran of logistics and auto transport. And he's been fighting for the last year and a half. He's been leading our fraud investigations and fraud monitoring initiatives at Super Dispatch. There's an entire tech team and a service team behind Jake. We have an entire compliance team and an entire tech team working on trust on the platform. So there's lots of initiatives, but it's been really great to talk to Jake because Jake is the person that's on the forefront. Jake is the person he gets to talk to. He gets to see firsthand the types of fraudulent activities that are happening, the customers that may fall victim to this or best practices. And he's on the forefront of identifying what we need to do to combat fraud collectively in this industry. Until next time, thank you for watching or listening to the podcast. Appreciate you all. If you have any questions or comments, you want to be on the show, and you have a critical, negative feedback, anything you have, feel free to reach out. You can email me directly at superbek@superdispatch.com. That's my email. You're more than welcome to email with any thoughts, ideas, or feedback you have. Until next time, thank you.